we're looking for a perspective to help us out biblically, because this is a video in stone of the tabernacle and the temple in Jerusalem that does neither of which exists anymore. But this is an intentional attempt to duplicate, to replicate. And so that gate right there is like the entrance to the tabernacle. And then the first thing that you come to is the bronze laver, the basin there where you wash. And then you approach the altar of sacrifice through another gate, right? Go through another gate, and the altar of sacrifice was that large. People have come in here and reconstructed what the altar looked like, or the size of the altar, based on the bases, the things that, what's at the bottom, the foundation. And so then once you've purified yourself and you have offered your sacrifice, then you are ready to, if you want to just continue on moving, and please take your pictures, take your time doing that. You can hear me through the earbud. Once you've offered your sacrifice, then you are acceptable in the presence of God, and so you go up by a series of steps into the Holy of Holies. Right? So this really is a preserved version of what how the tabernacle functioned and how both temples, first and second temple, function. The problem is location, right? And the problem is who's officiating. Would this be a stage? I think that some of that's skewed. Some of it's close. Okay. But this tabernacle is something like about 75 feet, something like 18 inches.
But they would have, wow.
Okay, so where are we? We're in Jerusalem, right? Okay, no, we're not in Jerusalem. We are in the northern Sinai deserts. Nope. We're in the far north. We're at the opposite end of the world, the Israel world, from those realities. And so the question then is, what is this doing?
It's a high place.
Doing here? Why is it here?
So you don't have to go to Jerusalem?
They didn't want the people going down to Jerusalem. They wanted to keep them up there.
That's exactly right. Where do we find that text? Is it 1 Kings 12? That's just a wild guess on my part.
Yeah, probably you're right.
Yeah. Just make yourself comfortable. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion here. And Jeroboam erected 2 golden calves, one at Bethel, which is just before you get to Jerusalem. It's like 10 miles north of, not even 10, 6 or 7 miles north of Jerusalem. Okay, maybe 10, 8 miles north of Jerusalem. So that's the southern border of the northern kingdom. And then, and at Dan, golden calves at Bethel in the south and at Dan here. So what is Jeroboam doing? He's marking his territory. He's marking his borders. And he says it's enough for you to going up to Jerusalem, O Israel. It's too hard for you, and these are your gods, O Israel, right? So Jeroboam the first, and he's the one who erects this current worship site here. But nothing ever comes from just out of the blue, out of nowhere, out of thin air in this world. So is there stuff going on here before? Is there pagan worship going on here before 1 Kings 12? And the answer is Matzevot. Think of what we saw at the visitor center. That's Canaanite. Okay? So this was a Canaanite worship center. Why do you suppose it was a worship center? Well, because the gods are good enough here to give water from straight up out of the ground. They don't know anything about hydrology and water tables and all of that stuff like we now know from scientific inquiry. So they're thinking that from Mount Hermon, that the gods are living under the mountain and they're bringing the water out from under just out of nowhere, out from under. That's a paganistic worldview. You say, well, that's weird. Yeah, no, paganism's weird. and it makes people weird. There's a text in Scripture that said, "You have become like the gods you worship." So if they're weird, you get weird. If they're immoral, and are killing each other and having sex with each other's wives and stuff like that, then yeah, you start acting like the gods that you worship. You get weird too, and your society goes to pot as well. All right, so there's this story in Judges chapter 18, and this is where the Israelites come into this story, into this world. So you've got Canaanites already here. And then in Judges 18, it starts out like this. In those days, there was no king in Israel. That's an indicator. There's nobody leading in righteousness. Dan, the tribe of Dan, was seeking a place for itself as an inheritance to dwell in, because until then, no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. That's almost tongue-in-cheek, because Joshua had given them an inheritance. It's down by Tel Aviv. But there were Canaanites with chariots of iron there, and they were unable to subdue the people. Then they had a hero that arose, and they thought, well, this guy's going to do it. A little cult of personality thing going on. You know about him because you learned about him in Sunday school. Little boys and girls, when y'all grow up, don't y'all want to be strong for God like Samson was? A Danite. Thank you very much. And so after this wonderful ministry of Samson, who was going to deliver his people and subdue Israel's enemies and stuff like that, what is the next event that happens? The whole tribe of Dan picks up, leaves their tribal inheritance, and comes up here to Dan. And that's the reason it's named Dan, is for the tribe of Dan, for their ancestor Dan, that was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Is making sense? Ringing bells? So the people of Dan sent 5 men, able men from among the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and Eshtaol. That's where Samson was from. His grave is at Zorah. And to spy out the land. Well, where were those guys all those years that Samson was fighting by himself? He's just a one-man wrecking crew. He never united Israel like a godly king like David would do. So he's not the example, he's the anti-example. So the question should be, little boys and girls, don't you guys want to be obedient, not like Samson was when you grow up? By the way, when you're comparing Saul and David, you're going to find more parallels between people like Saul, between Saul and Samson, Saul and Jephthah, and people like that, the weird judges, than you are David and those guys. And I think it's intentional by the biblical authors. This guy is a king like those other guys that were the not so good judges, that sacrificed their daughters and stuff like that. They said, go and explore the land. So they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of this guy named Micah, and they stole Micah's gods and the Levite that was supposed to be running Micah's private worship center. All this is out of bounds. And they took all that stuff and they brought it up here. And I'm going to skip forward in the story just a little bit, but this is all Judges chapter 8 territory. So the people of Dan went their way, and the people of Dan took what Micah had made and the priests that belonged to him, and they came to Laish. That's the former name of this city. It's also